Today, I am going to be talking about some of my favorite YA books that I've read so far. I didn't read all of these books this year. These are books that I have read over the course of the past few years, but they're ones that have stuck with me. These are all books that I would consider YA, but that may also fit into other genres. They contain little to no spice, and most of them do feature romance, but they also feature characters that are younger. The first book is If You Still Recognize Me by Cynthia So. This is about a girl named Elsie who lives in England. Her family is from Hong Kong, and she is going to Cambridge to study English. But her best friend Joan has moved back to Hong Kong, and she hasn't seen her in a very long time. She also has an online friend from the United States called Ada, who she has a big crush on, but is afraid of telling because they're long distance and they're both girls, which is a bit of a scary topic in an immigrant family. I haven't seen anybody talk about this book, but it really stood out to me when I read it. It's a fairly quick read. It's about 409 pages, but the book itself is very small, so it doesn't take very long to read. I really enjoyed the coming of age aspect of it and the way that Elsie felt all of these feelings and handled all of these situations right on the cusp of moving on to college. The romance was really sweet. I really enjoyed it. And I loved how it felt so real, but it still had a happy ending. This is also a debut novel by a non-binary author. I really enjoy it. And I think if you haven't read it and you feel like this might be something that interests you, that you should definitely give it a shot. The next book is Most Ardently by Gabe Cole Novoa. It is a Pride and Prejudice remix about a transgender man called Oliver, whose birth name was Elizabeth Bennet. It is essentially Pride and Prejudice, except Elizabeth is a boy. Nothing else changed. And I enjoyed this aspect because we got to see Darcy grow to trust and love Oliver as a man while being quite frustrated with him as a woman, because he truly believed they were two different people for most of the story. This is part of a series of remixed classics by a bunch of different authors. They are not at all related. I really like the cover art. It's also not very long. It's 289 pages. It's also not entirely historically accurate. There's a note at the end that discusses what it was like to be queer, specifically in Regency England, when it wasn't necessarily illegal, but people were affected by sodomy laws. This book does take into account that Oliver would not be accepted as a man or in a gay relationship publicly, especially not with somebody as high profile as Mr. Darcy. But it also lets them just be in love and allows them to have their happy ending for the sake of joy, instead of forcing us to acknowledge reality. If you enjoy Pride and Prejudice, and if you enjoy classics but from a queer perspective, this is a really good one. I read this one so quick. It was so good. The next book is Malice by Heather Walter. This is a retelling of Sleeping Beauty, where Sleeping Beauty falls in love with the witch who cursed her. It's from the perspective of a girl called Alice, who is some kind of a witch. They live in like these houses and they're called graces or something like that. They can do magic. She's hated because she's got dark magic. And so people just kind of hate her for that, even though she's never actually done anything wrong. People come to her so she can make them poisons and hexes. But she is good friends with Aurora, who's the princess of the kingdom Briar, where they live. But Aurora is cursed, and Alice is responsible for that curse. This is a duology. I have not read Misrule yet because it makes me feel sad. So I'll get there when I get there. But this one I really liked. The fourth book is The Bone Spindle by Leslie Vedder. I also have not heard anybody talk about this one. It is about three people. Fi, who is a treasure hunter, but is also a lady from a family of treasure hunters and historians. She's been cursed so that she is made to wander and can never stay in one place. It's about Shane, the princess of a kingdom made up of islands that were historically warlords who have now become more into politics. And it is about Briar Rose, who is the prince of a historical magical kingdom who has been cursed to sleep for 100 years. It is basically a retelling of Sleeping Beauty, but Briar Rose is a boy and Fi is kind of chosen magically to wake him up. They live in a bit of a wasteland where witch hunters roam trying to hunt down anybody they think could be a witch and violently murder them. They are also constantly living in fear of the legendary Spindle Witch who has cursed Briar and wants to kill him and everybody who is sleeping in that castle with him and anybody trying to save them. This is such a good series. Every single one of these books I read in like 2 days. This one is about 404 pages and it contains so much. We have lesbian romance, we have bisexual representation, we have like evil ex-boyfriends, we have Briar. Briar was the only character that I consistently loved throughout the entire series. At the end, I loved them all so much, but Briar really can do no wrong. This has hints of several different fairy tales, especially throughout the other 2 books. There's also another character who comes in later called Red, who is, I think, based on Little Red Riding Hood, but like twisted. She's got wolves that are like her sidekicks, but she's also got some issues. I really enjoy how this twisted up the fairy tale and it used witchcraft and magic in a way that I haven't seen before in books. I like the way that it treated queer relationships and how the characters weren't necessarily likable the entire time, but ultimately had good intentions. I highly recommend this series if you want a quick and easy read that is very enjoyable. Finally, I have Cinderella is Dead by Kalynn Bayron. I love this book. It is a Cinderella retelling about a girl named Sophia who is in love with her best friend. This takes place 200 years after Cinderella found her prince and found her romance, and now they live in this very dystopian type kingdom where there is a ball every year where teen girls have to go, and the men of the kingdom select wives based on how well they're dressed. And any girl who is not chosen at that ball disappears and is never seen again. Sophia is 16, and it is her turn to go to the ball. And when she gets there, she decides to go and hide and ends up in Cinderella's mausoleum, where she meets Constance, who is a descendant of one of the stepsisters from the story. Together, they make the decision to bring down the king, who is in charge of these balls, and they learn this great secret about Cinderella and about the king and about what is happening to these girls. I feel like this book has some implied romance. She definitely feels romantic feelings towards her female best friend, but that's not really the focus of the story. It's more about girlhood and taking down an oppressive system and fighting for your rights as a woman. Kalynn Bayron is an author that I love dearly. I don't see her anywhere online. I don't ever see anybody talking about her. And occasionally I walk into a bookstore and she's published another book. I never know about it ahead of time. I just find it somewhere. She writes about a lot of fairy tales. This one was the first book by her that I have ever read, and it has stuck with me ever since. So I highly recommend you go and read this one. And that is my top 5 favorite YA books that I have read so far. I really hope that this has inspired you to go and pick one of them up, or maybe to explore something similar. I understand that a lot of people are not big fans of YA stories, and I found that there are a lot of them that are quite enjoyable when you find a good author. Sometimes it's fun just to sit down with a simple and easy read that has a good plot behind it and funny characters. Sometimes I just want to read a story where they fall in love and they're happy. Hopefully, at the end of the year, I'll have some more to talk about. See you in another video.